If you're a fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender, you might not know how to feel about the series coming back as a live-action Netflix reboot. Maybe you're feeling on top of the world because, yay, reboot! Or maybe you're feeling a wee bit nervous because things didn't go so great with the last reboot. It's okay, don't panic, we are not here to talk about the 2010 Last Airbender movie. We're here to pay homage to the original series and go over some of the little details that you might have missed in this awesome show. While Avatar: The Last Airbender is set in its own world, it occasionally dips into our world. And while it doesn't make overt references to pop culture icons, sharp-eyed fans will know what's up. First off, can you smell what the airbender is cooking? No, I'm not having a brain glitch. Just setting up the fact that there's a fun crossover between Avatar: The Last Airbender and professional wrestling. Despite being two of the least likely things you'd imagine would be on screen together, there's actually a not-so-subtle reference to the wrestling world in an episode of Last Airbender. The Blind Bandit is a fan favorite, and that's mostly because it's a fantastic episode from start to finish. But maybe what kicks it over the edge for some fans is the event known as the Earth Rumble 6. It doesn't take a huge leap to see why we'd want to compare that event to professional wrestling. It's basically an ATLA version of the Royal Rumble. Even if there weren't any references to any famous wrestlers, it would be pretty easy to just watch and notice that, hey, this kind of looks like a nod to the world's largest wrestling promotion. But they didn't just wink at the WWE event that's been going on since 1988. They flat out included a character called the Boulder. So if they didn't want us to think of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, they were way off. But given the fact that he also bears a slight physical resemblance to The Rock, it's hard to imagine they weren't overtly going for it. And then when you add in the fact that other characters act like a classic Royal Rumble, it's hard to miss. For example, Fire Nation Man is clearly a send-up of the classic heels in old-school WWE wrestling. Plus, Sokka roots on the event like he's been watching wrestling since Hulk Hogan was doing his thing. Speaking of our nation's most famous pop culture icons, Luke Skywalker himself, Sir Mark Hamill, voices Fire Lord Ozai. And yes, I decided to call him Sir because, well, he's earned it, right? And technically he's not a Knight of the United Kingdom, but he's a frickin' Jedi Knight, so that's gotta count for something. Anyway, before I dive into full-on fanboy mode for Mark, let's get back to Avatar. It probably came as no surprise to any of you out there when you realized it was Mark Hamill doing a killer job as Fire Lord Ozai. After all, he's a talented actor and voiceover actor. And if you look at his VO resume, it's clear he's mastered the art of voicing villainous characters. He's voiced the Trickster and Swamp Thing, and perhaps most famously, the Joker. What's cool about it is that there aren't many actors out there who can play ultimate good characters like Luke Skywalker and ultimate baddies and still be convincing. So I guess what I'm saying is, Mark Hamill is a national treasure. Speaking of voiceover work, there are a couple of interesting things to note about some other actors on the show. For starters, most fans know that Uncle Iroh was originally voiced by actor Mako Iwamatsu. Mako was pretty much an acting and voiceover legend. He thrived in films like Conan the Barbarian, 7 Years in Tibet, and the 1966 movie The Sand Pebbles, which got him an Oscar nod for Best Supporting Actor. He was also a veteran of the stage, getting a Tony Award nomination for his role in the musical Pacific Overtures. And then, of course, he was a fantastic VO actor in roles like Aku from Samurai Jack and Uncle Iroh. And the man, frankly, had an angelic singing voice. Check out his heart-wrenching performance of the song Leaves from the Vine in the episode The Tales of Ba Sing Se. Since Iroh is singing it at the grave of his son, Lu Ten, Mako knew the moment needed to be filled with sorrow, so he sang it beautifully while letting his voice tremble with grief. Pure talent. In fact, this performance had such an effect on fans of the show that it became a calling card of sorts for Mako. He tragically died after voicing season 2 and was replaced by actor Greg Baldwin. And ever since then, Baldwin gets asked all the time to sing a version of Leaves from the Vine. But, and hats off to Greg on this classy move, he always refuses. That's because he says that song should remain something we only remember Mako by. Very cool, and pretty sad. Another interesting tidbit that you should know is when they were casting the part of Commander Zhao, they put out a casting notice that said they wanted a Jason Isaacs type. That's because the show's creators had dug the way Isaacs played an evil SOB in the movie The Patriot. If you've seen that one, you know he was an all-time baddie. But after many rounds of auditions, they couldn't find anyone who could nail the part, so they reached out to the man himself. Fortunately, he was in, and the Jason Isaacs type just became Jason Isaacs. Sometimes paying super close attention to the background of the show will give you glimpses into things to come. For example, there's the use of wanted posters. Take the episode The Deserter. In it, Team Avatar is first introduced to Zhang Zhang and Che. These two are perhaps the ultimate risk-takers since they deserted the Fire Nation army. That's seriously one gang you don't want to piss off. But they made their bed, so to speak. After Aang's real identity comes out, Che gets the crew safely to Zhang Zhang's camp. Of course, we all know what happens when you make your bed. You get your face on wanted posters. In Book 2, Earth, eagle-eyed viewers will notice that both Zhang Zhang and Che end up with their faces on one. Hope those two end up okay. And in that original ep, The Deserter, we see some wanted posters in the scene where the gang meets Zhang Zhang and Che. Most notably, we see one for the Blue Spirit. This poster isn't super relevant for that particular episode, but it's a nice use of foreshadowing, because we eventually meet this mysterious face in the episode The Blue Spirit. So that is a solid episode title. And as we find out, the Blue Spirit is Prince Zuko. So that wanted poster is a little wink to that later introduction. Another fun moment of face-based fun is in the episode The Painted Lady. Team Avatar comes upon a village that sits near a Fire Nation factory. They realize the village is being slowly poisoned by the factory. To help, Katara creates a disguise, pretending she's the Painted Lady, aka the water spirit of the village. She uses the disguise to scare the Fire Nation soldiers away from the village. But the kicker is that she then comes face to face, or painted face to painted face, with the actual Painted Lady of that village. But fortunately, the real Painted Lady isn't upset at the impersonation, and she thanks Katara for her help. Let's stick with body parts. Okay, that's a weird way to phrase it. Let's stick with parts of the body. That's better. Specifically, feet. One interesting detail involving feet is that Toph sleeps with her feet up. And sure, everybody tends to sleep a little differently. But the fact that Toph sleeps with her feet in the air has stirred a little bit of debate. There are some who think that it's a direct result of getting burned. In the episode The Western Air Temple, Toph's feet get burned by Zuko. It was an accident, but accidents still hurt sometimes. This was an immediate issue for Toph because she's blind and uses her feet, along with those earthbending powers, to keep herself oriented. Katara is able to come to the rescue and heals the wounds on Toph's feet. But later on, we can see Toph very clearly sleeping with her feet raised up. So, is this because those tootsies weren't quite healed yet? Some people think so, but others have raised the point that it's less about her injury and more about her natural state. Perhaps because of her earthbending powers, she's super sensitive to all the vibrations on the surface of the earth. So, to make sure she can fall asleep, she raises her feet up. It's like wearing earplugs, just, for her feet. Another bit of foot fact fun is when Aang fights Azula, he gets struck by lightning. Fortunately, it doesn't do much to inhibit his powers, but it does leave a nice scar. Later on, when you see the bottom of his foot, you can always see a scar there. It's a nice reminder of the level of detail that the writers and animators used in making the show. The show has a couple elements of mental health that clever and emotionally intelligent fans have honed in on. One is that male characters in ATLA aren't afraid to show emotion, and specifically, they aren't afraid to cry. A Redditor called Zenpai Senpai created a post that highlighted 4 panels of male characters from the show in full-on bawling mode. And why shouldn't these strong male characters cry? Emotions are a good thing. We all feel them. We should be allowed to show them, right? One particularly moving scene that involves men crying is in the last season when Zuko apologizes to Iroh. Zuko assumes his apology will be met with anger, yet Iroh shows compassion and even joins him in shedding tears together. And I'm willing to bet there were a lot of viewers who joined right along with them. Then there's Azula's mental health. Clearly she was a villain in the show. You commit certain acts and, well, you're not going to be loved by the fans. But it has been pointed out that she suffers from hallucinations and paranoia. And in fairness, those are things often associated with mental health disorders like schizophrenia. So if she does indeed suffer from a disease that she has no control over, it certainly helps us feel some compassion for her. Sometimes the food we eat and the drinks we drink say a lot about us. So why should this be any different for animated characters? Fortunately, the creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender worked some fun food details into the show. For starters, there's the episode The King of Omashu. In it, Aang joins a feast with King Bumi. The two are old friends, but for whatever reason, Aang doesn't recognize him. Maybe it's because it's been 100 years since they last saw each other. I'll admit I sometimes forget people after a year, so I won't judge. But Bumi, on the other hand, recognizes Aang. Bumi has prepared a meat-based feast, something that would certainly pose a problem for a vegetarian, especially one who isn't looking to reveal his true identity. But Bumi is a step ahead of Aang in this case, since he already knows who he is. He even mentions that the chicken at the feast doesn't have any skin, further cementing to all in attendance that we've got ourselves a carnivore's meal. Then he tosses a drumstick towards Aang. What he knows is that Aang not only won't eat it, but will instinctively use his airbending skills to swerve the chicken out of the way, and Aang does exactly that, fully revealing his identity as the Avatar. Another fun food-based detail is Uncle Iroh's passion for tea, specifically jasmine tea. A Redditor pointed out that as a firebender, he could easily have made boiling water immediately, but this would burn the leaves of jasmine tea, which is a delicate leaf. So the patience Iroh shows when making tea the more traditional ways says a lot about his character. Speaking of food, there's a fun through line of Cabbage in this series. For starters, there's the fan-favorite character, the Cabbage Merchant. Or at least I assume he's a fan favorite, he's just so dang lovable with his love for cabbage and all. But what we do know is that he was originally supposed to be a one-off character, appearing once in The King of Omashu. However, the writers realized they loved the dude, so they rewarded him with a recurring role throughout the series. And sure, he wasn't exactly a main character, but how many characters end up with a statue of themselves by the end of a show? Well, the Cabbage Merchant does, so that's gotta count for something. Another bit of Cabbage intrigue is in the episode The Puppet Master. In it, the crew interacts with an innkeeper who they are convinced is kind of off. You know the type, those folks who just give off a weird, abductee, torture-y vibe? Well, they were spot on, because it turns out the innkeeper was abducting and torturing citizens from the Fire Nation. So how does Cabbage come into play? Glad you asked. The animators gave us a hint that this innkeeper was a troubled soul with the use of a head of cabbage. When Katara picks up a cabbage that belongs to the innkeeper, it shows the face of an old lady in it. This foreshadows the fact that she is harming people, including nice old ladies. Not cool, innkeeper, not cool. When it comes to love and romance, anything can happen. Couples that end up great together can have a rocky start, and crushes can be revealed long before any romance blooms. And when a show includes little moments of crushes, romance, and the like, it always makes us identify more with the characters. First, we all shipped Sokka and Suki, right? Shipped? Am I using that right, kiddos? Anyway, they turned out to be one of the best couples on the show. But like many couples, things were a little awkward for them early on. And by that, I mean one of them was kinda uncomfortable with kissing. The two of them talk in the moonlight, and Suki seems fully ready to smooch. But Sokka, not so much. There's a good possibility that this is because his first love was Princess Yue, and she ended up turning into the moon spirit as a sacrifice. So maybe for Sokka, it was almost like kissing your new girlfriend in front of your ex. Always gonna be awkward. Fortunately, he was able to move past it, and the rest is history. And then there's the relationship between Aang and Katara. This one was a surprise to a lot of fans. It seemed like Katara would end up with Prince Zuko, but if you were paying close attention, you would have noticed that the writers included some hints that Aang and Katara were going to end up together. One was the time that Sokka tells Katara that she should kiss Jet. Aang isn't able to hide the fact that he's immediately jealous. Then there are also times when he blushes around her, classic signs of being in Crushville. I'm just glad he was able to find a romance and not just keep blushing. The Nickelodeon logo is a timeless classic. Anyone who has watched the channel over the years knows that familiar splat. And considering Avatar: The Last Airbender was on Nickelodeon, it should be no surprise to find out that there are a couple references to it peppered in. Or maybe slimed in? I don't know. For starters, there's the time when Sokka gives Toph a piece of meteorite after using the meteorite to make a sword. Being an earthbender, Toph naturally decides to have some fun with it. She bends it into a few different shapes. One of those shapes is clearly the Nickelodeon logo. Sure, it's not orange, and it doesn't literally say Nickelodeon on it, but I know a Nick splat when I see one. Another fun Nick-based shout-out is in the episode The Siege of the North Part 1. In it, Master Pakku makes a reference to a sea sponge. It's not a major plot point or anything, it's more like a throwaway line. But it's clearly a shout-out to another one of Nickelodeon's classic characters, SpongeBob SquarePants. Another fun tidbit is that if you happen to watch the German translation of the scene, it's not a sea sponge that's referenced, but a starfish, which, as I see it, is a pretty clear shout-out to SpongeBob's buddy, Patrick. It's nice when families shout each other out, don't you think? That's about it for us today, you guys. Hopefully this video has provided you with a little bit of a taste of the original Avatar: The Last Airbender as you wait for the new live-action series to come out on Netflix. Let's all keep our fingers crossed that it lives up to the expectations of the loyal fans. Either way, be good to each other, and we'll see you in the comments section.